We've talked about the procedure for solving linear equations. Now let's write it down. This procedure is extremely important. It's hard to emphasize too much how important it is. Be careful that you write it down exactly right. I've put a star beside it to emphasize the fact that this is something you really do need to have in your notes. Procedure for solving linear equations. Step 1, remember? Simplify each side of the equation. Simplify each side of the equation. When you get through simplifying each side of the equation, you should have ax plus b equals cx plus d. You should have ax plus b equals cx plus d. In these expressions, the x is understood to be the variable. The a, b, c, and d stand for constants. And so we have a variable term plus a constant term on the left side of the equation, a variable term plus a constant term on the right side of the equation. Step 2, multiply both sides of the equation by the LCD. Remember, LCD means least common denominator of all the fractions in the equation. Multiply both sides of the equation by the LCD of all the fractions in the equation. Multiply both sides of the equation by the LCD of all the fractions in the equation. Step 3. Step 3 is sort laundry. Sort laundry. Use the addition property to remove the constant term from the left and the variable term from the right. Use the addition property to remove the constant term from the left and the variable term from the right. Use the addition property to remove the constant term from the left and the variable term from the right. Once that is done, step 4, divide by the coefficient of the variable. Divide by the coefficient of the variable. Divide by the coefficient of the variable. This procedure is just as important for solving linear equations as the order of operations procedure is for simplifying variable expressions. Remember that in the order of operations, we're told always to work inside symbols of inclusion as the first step. What happens if there are no symbols of inclusion? Remember? You go to the second step, of course. If one of the steps is not needed, you simply skip over it and go to the next. Exactly the same thing happens in this procedure for solving linear equations. At the beginning, you're told to simplify each side of the equation. What happens if you don't need to simplify each side? Well, you just go right down to the next one. Multiply both sides by the least common denominator of all the fractions in the equation. What happens if there are no fractions in the equation? Well, you go right down to the next step. So this procedure works for every linear equation. You simply use the steps in order as you need them. Perhaps there's no simplifying needed, but you do have fractions, and you would begin with the fraction step, eliminating the fractions by multiplying by the least common denominator of all the fractions. Sometimes we don't need to simplify and we don't have fractions, and so we would begin with step 3. Step 3, the laundry sorting, uses the addition property. The addition property removes the constant term from the left and the variable term from the right, and then we can divide by the coefficient of the variable. What happens if the coefficient of the variable is 1? Well, we don't need to divide by it then. So we use this procedure in order, just like the order of operations, using each step as needed.